Today we're going to finish up our study of Chapter 2. On your last homework assignment, you were simply to list the variables, decide whether they were categorical or quantitative, and state the units. We're just going to go into a little more detail and do a couple of examples. So this can be a very, very short lesson. We always need to know the who, what, and why to analyze data. But the more we know, the more we understand. Who and what may be the only thing you know about your data. Why is usually important as well. But when we get into the other ones, the when and the where gives us some nice information about the context. Are they values from a large public university? Those may mean something much different than similar values recorded at a smaller private college. How was the data collected? And can it make a difference between insight and nonsense? Okay, if you take an internet survey, which you may or may not have, or if you ever create an internet survey, unfortunately, the data that you get from those can most possibly be useless. The main reason for this is you have no clue who's taking it. Maybe it's the same person over and over again. Maybe they're feeding you a bunch of nonsense. They could be a male and they could be answering female. Well, all of a sudden that data becomes useless. So how it's collected definitely makes a big difference between whether it's good data or complete nonsense. The first step of any data analysis should always be to examine the W's, your who, what, when, where, and why. Make sure you know the why and the who and the what before you proceed with your analysis. If you don't know bare minimum who and what, you can't analyze the data because it's not really data. So, that being said, let's take a look at what can go wrong. So what can go wrong when you're collecting data and analyzing data? You may forget to label a variable as categorical or quantitative. Okay? And when you are going through and labeling them, stop and think about the question that you're wanting to know. Because again, remember, sometimes numerical data is not always quantitative. It depends upon what the question was asked and what the context of that data is. Just because your values are numbers, don't assume that it's quantitative. Always be skeptical. Don't take the data for granted. Don't just assume that it's good. If you don't know how it was collected, again, that internet survey, useless data, rarely is very good to analyze. So don't always take data for granted. Don't assume that it's good. Make sure you know your information. So we're going to take a look at two different examples and we're going to list all of the important stuff about each one of the W's. So, a Consumer Reports article on energy bars gave the brand name, flavor, price, number of calories, and grams of the protein. So the first thing we need to answer is the who. Now, I cannot tell you how many times I see people get this wrong because they're looking for a name. The who, here's what I get as an answer a majority of the time. The who is Consumer Reports. That's not who is being studied. Consumer Reports is a company that just does magazines. They collect information on all kinds of items. What did they actually collect information about? They collected information on energy bars. The who are the energy bars because the energy bars are who we know information about. Well, what do we know about the energy bars? Well, we were told their brand name, their flavor, their price, the calories, the protein, and the fat. When was this data collected? Well, unfortunately, without the actual magazine, we don't know that specifically. If we had the magazine, we'd at least be able to tell you the month and the year that the magazine was produced. But without the actual magazine, the best we can say is we don't know when it was collected. And that's okay. You don't have to know. Where was the data collected? Well, this is again one that we don't know the answer to. We don't know a specific city or state or any information like that. How was the data collected? Well, if we're thinking, it doesn't specifically say up here, but let's think logically. If you have energy bars, what's a good way to get some basic brand information, grams, protein, all of that? From the label. Perhaps they did a taste test, and they asked people about the energy bars. So perhaps it's a test, but most likely something like this, how did they get their information? Most likely it's from a label, because the labels have the brand name and the flavor and the calories and all of that. And the price obviously came from the store. So why did we collect this data? Well, that's a good question. Is there a specific reason? No, let's do some thinking though. Maybe we want to provide information for potential customers. Maybe we want to compare which one is better for a specific diet. So there's many reasons as to why. Use some common sense and just come up with a good logical why. Now the next thing we want to know, now we want to categorize them as categorical or quantitative. So now we're going back and we are specifically focusing on those whats. Okay, so these 6 things, we have 6 items to list. Which ones are categorical and which ones are quantitative? Now, if they're quantitative, you have to be able to tell me a unit. So brand name. Brand name is definitely categorical. Flavor. Chocolate, strawberry, that kind of thing. I would definitely say that is categorical. So let's just do some little jotting. So brand name was categorical. Flavor was categorical. Price, well, that's definitely, because what do we say is the unit for price? It's dollars. So that would definitely be quantitative. Calories, well, the unit for calories is just that, calories. How many calories did you burn? I burned 500 calories. So that has a unit. It's measurable, definitely quantitative. Protein, it's set up in the little blurb that we're talking about grams of protein and fat. So that's grams. That definitely makes it quantitative. And fat, also quantitative. So in summary, what were the categorical variables? They were brand name and flavor. And what were the quantitative variables with their units? They were price in dollars, calories simply in number of calories, protein in grams, and fat in grams. So we have one more that we're going to do the exact same thing with. So a report on the Boston Marathon listed each runner's gender, country, age, and time. So who was being studied? Well, we were studying the Boston Marathon, but we weren't studying just the marathon. We were studying specifically the Boston Marathon runners. So those are your who, the actual people who ran in the Boston Marathon. What did we study about them? Well, it says up here, it collected the runner's gender, country, age, and time. So gender, country, their age, and their time. Again, in time we mean finishing time. When was this collected? Well, this one doesn't list a specific year for the Boston Marathon. So unfortunately, this is one that we don't know because we don't know what year of the Boston Marathon we're studying. Where was it collected? Well, that's an easy answer. It's the Boston Marathon, so it's being collected in Boston. It's kind of a common sense one. How is it collected? Well, for anybody who's ever run in a race, or maybe you haven't, you wear a little, it's called a bib. It has your number on the front of it. That actually has a tracking chip in it. That's one way that's how they actually get your time. The rest of the information though, the runner's gender, age, and country, when you register for a race, they ask you all of that information. So the 2 ways that we collected the data were the registration form and the little chip for time. So registration information, we mentioned that we had the chip for the times that they ran. Why did we collect this data? Well, there really isn't a specific reason. Maybe it's to compare improvements from year to year. We simply just want to report the race results. Maybe we want to see has there been any changes in how fast the best people finish or how fast the slowest people finish. Now we have to do the categorical and quantitative. So now we're back up to the whats. So we have 4 whats: gender, country, age, and time. So are any of those measurable with units? Well, gender isn't, and neither is country. Can you measure age? Absolutely. How old are you? I am, and you tell them how many years of age you are. So that's definitely measurable. Is time measurable? Absolutely. Typically, you're going to be given the time like in a combination of hours and minutes, that kind of thing. So which ones are categorical? Those are the ones that are not measurable. That is their gender and their country. Which ones are measurable? Well, that was their age, which is typically measured in years. The time, it's going to start with hours, but they'll also include minutes and potentially seconds if it's a close race. So, but hours is the main unit of measurement. And so that's the end of this particular video. Again, it was meant to be short. In class, you'll do some more examples like we just did. So again, that homework assignment is for in class, and we will see you then.